then
Yeah.
again, I just thank you again to all the members. Just appreciate everything that everyone is doing across the board. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul because he's going to kind of drive this. Just thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you all for coming. I'm Paul Peterson, just introduced by Charlie DeComo, and I'm looking forward to tonight's meeting especially. Dr. Balsells has presented before on the Spanish Civil War, and he has shared that he would be glad to do this, and we're even looking to something next year. His stuff is really good. But for the bio, for those who don't know him, he's originally from Igualada, a small city near Barcelona, Spain. After graduating with a PhD in chemistry, he moved to the United States with a postdoctoral fellow at San Diego State University and later at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. He started his professional career as a process chemist at Merck and Company in Rahway, New Jersey, and later at West Point, Pennsylvania. 2019, he joined Johnson & Johnson, where he currently is the global head of discovery process research. Jaume started collecting at the age of 12, initially building on his mother's collection and working part-time at a Philatelic retail store in his hometown. He collects Spanish stamps and postal history, mostly from the classic period. He also collects Greenland Parcel Post, which is tonight's topic. He's a member of, among others, AFINET, which is the largest online Spanish philatelic society, and the Greater Philadelphia Stamp Collectors Club. He has published in several articles in philatelic journals and started exhibiting in 2022. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Balsells to us tonight. Question for you, Jaume. Do you want questions during or after?
The presentation is going to take about 50 minutes, I guess. If we have enough time, it's okay to interject in the middle of the presentation. No problem.
It's not like they're going to close us out of the room, so we're good.
Right. If we're short on time, then maybe we hold the questions until the end.
I'll pull questions. Yeah, sounds good. So folks, if you have questions, then just raise your hands and we'll shout out and we'll be good. Otherwise, we will quiet ourselves down and you can start to share, Jim.
All right, fantastic. As we were waiting, the computer that I was planning on using has crashed.
Uh-oh.
But no worry. Can everybody see the presentation?
We're good. Yep.
All right, fantastic. So I managed to email the presentation to a different account, and I'm using a different computer, but due to the size constraints of email, I'm going to have to use the PDF version. So you'll miss on a couple of animations, but you're not going to miss much. As long as you can see enough quality, we should be all right. Yep. So yeah, the goal for today is, a little bit of an overview of the parcel post stamps of Greenland that were used between 1905 and 1938. This is a collection that I started about 2020, so about 6 years ago, right in the middle of COVID. And I was trying to look for something that was outside of my specialty of Spain, but also something that hopefully could excite my daughter about collecting stamps as well. So I figured, the animals, the polar bears and the seagulls, maybe she'll be interested in all the nice colors. She likes the stamps, but really the one that's continuing the collection, it's me so far. But anyway, let's keep the hope alive. So a little bit about Greenland. What do we know about Greenland? Largest island in the world. It's about 22% of the surface of the contiguous 48 U.S. states, right? So even though it's not as big as it looks in the Mercator maps, it's still actually a pretty big chunk of land. It's very cold up there. 75% of the surface is permanently covered in ice, even though it seems like that number is going down over the years with the way that the climate is changing. It's mostly uninhabited. There's not very many people there. Population currently in 2025, 2026, it's a little bit under 60,000, so that's not that much. Just before the meeting, I looked up the population of Lancaster County. It's about 560,000 folks living there. So that's like 10 times Greenland, right? Just so that you can get a little bit of a comparison. But in the period of time that we're talking about today, so between 1905 and 1937, the population basically was starting at 13,000 people, and then growing to about 18,000 people. So, just a small village, right? But spread across a very, very large chunk of land, right? Most settlements are on the southwest coast, so it's this area over here. Particularly around this big bay, there's a lot of settlements. So that's most of where things took place, right? Of what we're going to be talking about today. Resources are basically, or the economy basically is based on natural resources, primarily fishing, also some mining. There were, aluminum-rich mines that were exploited in the beginning of the 20th century, all the way up, through the Second World War. But primarily, tourism is a little bit growing, but it's still, pretty minor at this point, right? Politically, it's an autonomous region that belongs to Denmark. And it has been under exclusive Danish control since 1814. Before that, it was still controlled by Denmark, but Denmark and Norway were actually a single country or a single nation. They split in 1814, and basically Greenland stayed under Danish control, right? One particular aspect about their economy, and it's important to the talk today, is that Greenland, for most of its history, was under a very strict trade monopoly, basically established by Greenland up until 1950. This was a way of controlling politically the island. If you don't allow your people to talk to anybody else other than you, or trade with anybody else other than you, then they really don't see what else is out there, right? So it's a way of controlling what's going on and basically avoiding any conflict, right? This piece of paper that you see on the slide, this is basically the heading of a document from 1776. That's basically it's in Danish, right? It details how this trade monopoly it's working, right? So basically, it's a new order forbidding the unauthorized trade with Greenland and other laws, right? It's a document that sometimes we see in auctions, and it's important because it's related to how this trade was established with Greenland. How did Denmark enforce this monopoly? They did create a government-sponsored company that I'm not going to try to butcher the name in Danish. I'll just say the initials KGH, and I'll refer to the KGH during the talk. But basically, this is the Royal Greenland Trading Company, and basically they handle all the shipping between Copenhagen and Denmark, and then different settlements in Greenland, right? Of course, they also handle the mail and parcels. And when we're talking about parcels, we're talking about private items that somebody would send to a family member or a friend, like foodstuffs or clothes or books or newspapers. Things of a personal nature, and parcels were restricted up to or limited up to 10 kilograms, which is 22 pounds. Everything beyond 22 pounds was considered freight, and then it had to be negotiated with the KGH in terms of how large it was and et cetera, right? But handling of mail and parcels up until 1905, it was free. They would do this free of charge. But in 1905, with the rising volume of parcels that had to be transported and also rising cost, basically the KGH wanted to charge for the transport of those parcels. So they went to the Danish Post and told them, hey, you should start issuing stamps for Greenland. And the Danish Post said, no way, we don't want any piece of paper that gives kind of the impression that Greenland is a separate country. But they did allow the KGH to print their own stamps that they could basically use to pay for these postage, right, or parcel fees to carry parcels to Greenland. So the stamps were produced by the KGH under the authorization of the Danish Post. And basically, they were used as normal stamps. They would just, initially, they would stick them directly on the wrappers on the parcels. Later on, started in 1909, Greenland started adopting parcel cards, which are probably many of you already know. Other countries in Scandinavia and Switzerland and others postage parcel cars during the 19th and 20th century, right? So basically, when 1909 and after that, we will see those parcel cars, and that's what we have today for the most part to study the postal history related to these stamps. The stamps were used until 1938. In 1938, the Danish Post basically issued the first stamps for Greenland. That's when they started charging for the mail as well. And basically at that point, these parcel post stamps from the KGH were no longer valid, no longer in use. The picture that you see on the slide, this is one of the ships, one of the most common, the one that we see the most. It's called the Hans Egede. I don't know if you can see the letters, but this is one of the ships that belonged to the KGH that did the route between the port of Copenhagen and then the different settlements in Greenland. And if the name Hans Egede doesn't resonate, I brought this stamp here. Hans Egede was a Norwegian missionary, a Lutheran missionary from the 18th century that did most of his work bringing Christianity to Greenland and also help with the development of settlements and etc. with the indigenous people, right? So it's certainly one of the sort of the recognized founding fathers of Greenland, right? All right, a little bit more about these parcels and how, just to try to give an idea of the volume of this mail, right? Most of the population that I mentioned in Greenland were indigenous population, Inuit, and really these people were not interested in having any or much interaction with Denmark or trading with Denmark, or they weren't receiving parcels from Denmark because they didn't know anybody in Denmark. The people that were using the service were a few hundred Danish nationals that were living in Greenland, some throughout the year, some only between the spring and the fall. But these are the folks that were receiving parcels or were sending parcels from Greenland back to the mainland. It's estimated that only about 400 people across the entire Greenland were actually Danish nationals residing there. The travel was not year-round. It was only when the weather allowed, typically between the spring and the fall. And there were only a few ships doing this. It's 3 or 4 ships that were doing a few trips during the year. And it's estimated that and the volume grew over the years, but it's estimated that only between 1,000 to 3,000 parcels were carried from Denmark, from Copenhagen to Greenland annually by the KGH. So we're not talking about a large volume of mail. We're not going to talk about a large volume of existing pieces today. And the numbers of stamps that were issued is also pretty small, as you'll see. Let's start talking about the stamps, and I want to bring here sort of what the Scott catalog tells us. So according to Scott, we see 11 number queues, right? So these are the parcel stamps. 9 of them they catalog as typographed, Q1 through Q9, and then they have 2 more in 1937 that were lithograph printed, right? Q10 and Q11. If we start looking at the details, we see a few A's and B's. These are basically perforation varieties. And there's also some text in here saying certain printings were issued without sheet margins. So basically, the outer rows of the sheet will have straight edges as opposed to perforated edges, right? So there's a number of varieties and things in here. So what I'm going to try to do in the next few slides is try to explain where these come from, right? There's a whole story behind all this, right? Let's jump into it. This is the first stamp. This is Q1, is the lowest value in the set. Why do I like the stamps? I like it because I think they're cool. I think it's a very modern design for 1905. If you look at what type of stamps other countries were issuing, you see kings and queens and very elaborate engravings, right, and signs of royalty and etc. We see here a very simple Art Deco almost design, right, and very connected to nature, right, with the seagulls, with the waves, the coat of arms in the center with the polar bear. The stamps were designed by a fellow by the name of Gerhard Heilmann, I think. He was a painter, an artist, also interested in nature, particularly in birds, and he wrote books about birds and stuff. The stamps were printed by Thiele in Copenhagen. These guys were professional stamp printers. They also printed many of the regular stamps of Denmark. So these guys knew what they were doing. The stamp, as you see, it has it doesn't have the name of the country. The words Pakeporto basically mean parcel post, which makes sense. Has the coat of arms of Greenland, and they're pretty large, also compared to the normal size of stamps in this period at the turn of the 20th century. 28 by 35 millimeters. It's about 50% bigger than, for example, like the definitive Spanish stamps of the period, right? So they stand out, compared to the stamps that were available at the time. They were printed in sheets of 25, line perforated, which means that the size, of the stamps is going to be slightly different. And an important detail is that in 1905, when the sets were issued for the first time, they didn't allow sales to collectors. You couldn't go to the office and just buy the stamps or buy a sheet. The only way that you could get access to the stamps is if you received a parcel and you decided to soak off the stamps from the wrap. And this is going to influence how the story evolves. Still trying to beat off a cold here. Sorry for that. All right. This picture on the left, this shows it's a self-portrait by Gerhard Heilmann. So this is the fellow that designed the stamps. And I managed to get a picture from an original drawing of his with an original version of the design. And you can see, kind of the idea that he had in mind. And then, there's minor retouches here in the symmetry of the waves, the position of the seagulls, and etc. But the concept is pretty much what remained, right? So it's a really nice transition into what the stamp is going to be, right? This is a set of proofs of the first set. It was 3 values: the 1, the 5, and the 10 ore. And the final colors, they were imperforated. They're mounted on a cardstock paper. And yeah, it's a set of proofs that one can have access to, right? They're not very easy to find. But basically that brings us to the first set. Like I said, the 3 values, the 1, the 5, and the 10. The numbers that you see at the bottom of the pictures, this is the total number of stamps issued, right? So you divide by 25, you'll get the number of sheets. So there's not that many stamps, right? This was in 1905. They lasted for several years. Like I said, printed by Thiele. The perforations are 12 1/4, and these are going to change over the years, right? So even though the number was, not insignificant, there were quite a bit of number of stamps, right? The fact that collectors didn't, for the most part, have access to them, and there's very few copies, especially unused or mint. These are quite rare and not the most easy to find, right? They were printed in a good size sheet of paper that allowed for perforations of the outer edges. So basically, when we're talking about the first printing, the 1905 printing, all the stamps are perforated on their 4 sides, right? And I'm showing here copies where these are corner copies that shows basically the selvage of the sheet. So that's an easy way to distinguish them, right? So as the stamps were being used and they started running low, basically what they did is just go back to the printer and say, hey, we need another printing of the 5 ore or the 10 ore, etc. Just to keep running, right? So this is basically what we are going to see over the next, almost 30 years, right? In order to do the new printings, they would basically take apart the existing plates, clean up the types one by one, probably with some type of solvent, and basically remount them again in a 5 by 5 disposition. but obviously the order would be different. So, as you can imagine, there are going to be some minor differences, and that allows us to identify what printing we're talking about, and depending on how the positions are, right? All right. We then go to 1910, and this is the first time 5 years later when they start running out of stamps. So they go back to Thiele and they say, hey, we need another few thousand stamps of the 5 ore and the 10 ore. Those were the values that were most commonly used at the time. So they made 10,000 and 15,000. And there's two differences here. The first one, well, three differences. The paper is a little bit different. It's a white paper instead of a yellowish paper. It's a little bit thinner. And it's also smaller, right? So it didn't allow to perforate the outer rows of the sheet, which led to stamps having straight edges, right? So if we see two straight edges, obviously it's a corner of the sheet. If we see a straight edge, it's either left or right, top or bottom, right? And then we have 9 stamps in the center that are going to be perforated on all 4 sides, right? The perforation is still the same, 12 1/4, right? So they're, in that sense, they're indistinguishable from the first printing. So that was 1910. 5 years more, we get to 1915, and as the volume of parcels start growing, they realize that they need additional values, right? So they created a 2 ore value. They created a 15 ore, which is the purple one, and they created a 20 ore, which is this red one. They, for the most part, follow almost the same method of 1910. So they used smaller sheets that didn't allow to perforate the outer rows. So we, again, see stamps with straight edges, but they did change the perforation. These are not 12 1/4 anymore. These are 11 1/4. So it's they're noticeably different. Right? The other big change in 1915 is that for the first time, they allowed the sale of stamps to collectors. And this was a huge hit. And, I've read some of the reports from the KGH, and both in 1915 and in 1916, they report making more money from selling stamps to collectors than actually from transporting parcels, which, it speaks to, how desirable these set of stamps were to collectors worldwide, right? So this would influence how the fact that collectors got into this, right? This influenced how the stamps were being sold, right? And the way it happened is that if you're gonna, like, for example, you look at the green stamp, the 1 ore stamp, right? And you have to pick one stamp for your collection, right? Most collectors would prefer to put the one that has the 4 sides perforated rather than a straight edge, right? It's just visually makes more sense, right? So these folks at the KGH basically were just tearing up sheets to get the 9 stamps in the center to get collectors happy, and then having the left and right, top and bottom sides of the sheet, right? That they had to figure out how to get rid of. So, they wanted to fix this. And what they decided to do in 1918 was to get all the remnants of all the stamps that they had with sheets with straight edges. They send them back to the printer, to Thiele, and basically they asked to reperforate the outer edges of all the sheets, right? So now we have another type of variety, and it's going to be in all the 6 values, right? The 1, the 2, the 5, the 10, the 15, and the 20, with reperforated edges, right? So I'm going to show a couple of examples, right? Now, the reperforations were also done 11 1/2. So they're almost indistinguishable from the stamps that are perforated 11 previously, right? Which these two are an example, right? How can we tell? In many cases, we can tell because if we look at the edge that's been reperforated, we don't see sort of that tearing up when we split 2 stamps, right? It's a perfect scissor cut on the edge, right? And it's basically should be a straight line, right? So that's what we see on this one, on the right side, and also on this 2 ore on the right side. Okay. Then we have the 5 and the 10. And the 5 and the 10, if you remember, were printed back in 1910. And those were perforated with the same gauge as the 1905s, which is 12 and a quarter. But then the reperforation was done 11 and a quarter. So now we have stamps that have some sides with one perforation size and some sides with a different perforation size. These are called compound perforated, according to the people that know about stamps. So I have a couple of examples here, right? So this 5, if you notice the left side and the top, these are the original perforations, so they're 12 and a quarter. And then the right and the bottom are the reperforated size sides. So this is basically a corner, bottom right corner of the sheet, right? And they're perforated 11.5. Okay. This 10 on the right side of the slide, it has the same. This is the top of the sheet. So the top is reperforated 11.5, and then the 2 vertical sides and the bottom are 12 and a quarter. All right. The 5, by the way, this is probably the biggest rarity of Greenland Parcel Post if we're talking about stamps, because they only had 25 sheets of this stamp that were sent to be reperforated, right? So basically, the stamp that has like 2 sides reperforated, there's only, I mean, some I guess must have been lost, but there cannot be more than 100 copies in existence, right? So this is like I said, one example. So it's one of the gems of Greenland Parcel Post Philatelic. All right. Something that we also see in different cases is when the original straight edge of the stamp was not very wide, and basically they put the perforations very close to the border of the stamp that's printed. And then, the person that collected the stamp didn't bother, tearing sort of this little salvage out. And we see, these type of stamps. So these are the other 2 values, the 15 and the 20. And these are also, the original perforation is 11 and a quarter. And then the reperforation is 11.5, right? So these are harder to distinguish other than, having the little bit of extra paper. So that's basically what explains all this difference in perforations. Obviously, after 1918, the interest of collectors was understood, what collectors wanted. So every other printing, basically, they maintained the perforation size. So they were all perforated 11 and a quarter. And they were printed in large enough sheets that allowed for perforation of the outer rows. So basically, we're not going to see straight edges anymore. But the system of, as we run out of stamps, we're going to order another printing. This continued between 1918 and 1931. I'll just go through. There's some minor differences between the printings. Sometimes the paper is a little bit different or is a little bit darker. Sometimes the gum is clear or it's yellow. But for the most part, the stamps are very similar, right? For the 1 and the 2, there's a very distinct printing, which is the 1919 printing. This was right after World War I. So they probably were trying to cut costs. So they used a very cheap paper, which is this, very gray. It's probably some recycled paper that has fibers from cloth and etc. We call this war paper varieties, and they exist on the 1 ore and the 2 ore. And then after this, in the 1920s, as they, order more printings, those are already on white paper. On the 10, not much varieties in terms of paper, but we do see a shift in color from this dark blue navy color to more of a blue-green towards the later printings. And, if you look at all the printings, one to the next, maybe you don't see a lot of difference. But when you look at the 1905s and the 1928s, they're completely different colors, right? And as I'm trying to show in here. The 20 ore stamp, this is the one that has, the most number of stamps issued, right? There were 6 additional printings totaling over 300,000 stamps. These were the stamps that had the most use of all of them. The majority of the use was not for parcels. It was actually as a fiscal stamp for savings books and I'll explain what those are later. But yeah, this is clearly the most common one, but also a pretty one. Then we get to 1930. And in 1930, they realized that they need to update their rates for carrying parcels. It's not a rate increase. It's basically, some rates went up by 19 times, 20 times, even more, depending on what size package you were mailing, right? But this required, the KGH to make stamps with higher values. So that's when we get these three stamps, 70 or the 1 krona and the 3 kroner. The kroner, the krona is basically it's like the dollar, right? And then the ore is like the fraction, is like the cent. So 100 ore is 1 krona, right? That I think should make sense to everyone. So these are in 1930, and then the last printings were in 1937. This was a year before the stamps before the Greenland stamps were first issued, before these stamps were basically put out of service. They did order one last printing. Interestingly, though, and I don't know the reason for this, I haven't been able to figure that out, but they didn't go back to the same printer. They actually chose two different printers, and they split the order of these stamps between this printer, Schultz, and also in Copenhagen, and another one that we'll see in the next slide. Schultz basically was ordered to make... Was that a question?
Okay.
No. So Schultz was asked to make these four values. So basically, it's reprints of existing values of the 10, the 20, the 70, and the 1 krona. They were basically reusing the same plates, the same types as Thiele had been using in the past. The one noticeable difference here is that they used a different perforation size, right? So these stamps are perforated 10 3/4, right? These are the most common because they printed a large number of them, and they were only in use for about a year. In 1938, basically they stopped. So there were a large number of them that were still available, and the KGH continued to sell them at face value to collectors, after 1938. But part of the printing went to another printer, which is this company called Andresen Lachman. They did perforate the stamps with the same gauge as Schultz, so 1075. But I guess they didn't have typography printing capabilities. So basically, they had to redraw the stamps so that they could print with their technology, which was lithograph, right? So these are the two numbers that Scott catalogs as Q10 and Q11. They're, like I said, noticeably different. Maybe not the first time you see them, but if you pay attention to some of the details, right? So the Thiele printings have the letters. They're much bulkier. They're thicker. The line or the dash that separates the two words basically is also thicker. This is Q11, right? So you can see the letters are thinner. The serifs are also a little bit different. The bear, many times you can barely see the eye, and the lines on the coat of arms are all very, very thin compared to the previous printings by Thiele and Schultz, right? So they're clearly distinguishable. So it makes sense that Scott would give him a different number, right? And this is all about the stamps, and this is how the stamps came to be. I'm kind of showing here a summary of what I think is the basic set, right? So it's 18 stamps. It starts with the 1905 to 1915, three values perforated 12 1/4, right? The 1, the 5, and the 10. Then we go into the 1918 to 1930 Thiele printings. So it's all the values. These are all perforated 11 1/4, right? I'm not including here the reperforated. And then we have the two issues in 1937. The Schultz four values that are 10 3/4, and then the lithograph by A&L, which are also 10 3/4, right? So this is what I consider the basic set if you want to have a complete run of the Greenland Parcel Post Stamps. Now, if you're a nut job like me and you want to try to get into all the printings, right? You're going to chase, stamps with straight edges, and you want to have all the possible orientations, the northeast corner, the southwest corner, et cetera, right? You want to have the reperforated varieties. I try to get reperforated on one side and then reperforated on two sides, more to the challenge, right? So that means that I need to find about 65 stems in total to have, what would be a complete set, right? And if you still want to get more specialized, then you can look at, what are the minor varieties, right, between stamps of the same value within the same sheet and et cetera, right? And a lot of these have been studied and are cataloged. It's very easy to find that information. I'm just showing a few here, just so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. So these are some of the most, well recognized, right? So we have this one we call the snowball, right? There's like this little white dot next to the foot of the bear. This one has the left frame has this like double bend on its outer frame. We have the dot on the eye on the 5 oar. We have the dot near the paw on the 15 oar. And there's a lot of this. There's probably 60 or 70 across all the values of different printing flaws that are characterized, right? So I also collect this. They're part of somewhere in my albums, right? But again, it's very easy. This is all being studied, and it's just a matter of looking through, looking for the stems and finding the one that you want, right? So these are just examples from my album of the 2 oar and the 5 oar, the study of varieties. And beyond this, then we get into more interesting things. Now is getting into errors and getting things that are a little bit more unique, right? Many of the values, not all of them, but many of the values have imperforated varieties, and typically is imperforated on one of the outer sides. These are 2 examples that I have in my collection, the 2 oar and the 10 oar. So as you can see, this is not sort of those sheets that were not very big. There was no space to perforate the outer rows and etc. These is basically missing perforation in the bottom row or in the left row, right? And a couple more that I have also in my collection are these Q10 and Q11. These are basically a fully imperforated sheet, and they're just really amazing corner copies. I love these couple of stamps, right? Very, very, very pretty. All right, so that's about the stamps. Let's talk a little bit about postal uses and postal history. I've been referring to it, right? That most of all these parcels travel from Denmark, from Copenhagen to different settlements in Greenland. That's the vast majority of the postal history that we have today that's made it, to today, that survives, right? Parcels from Greenland to Denmark do exist, but they're really, really scarce. And for the most part, they didn't use parcel cards. They would just continue to just put the stamps on the wrapper, and then basically just ship them, send them with the ships back to the metropolis. I've seen references of parcels being shipped between settlements in Greenland, but I've never seen one. And as far as I can attest, they're extremely rare. I've never seen one. I mentioned that the use was up until 1909 directly on the wrapper. The parcel cards start becoming available in 1909, and they were used all the way up to 1938. This table here is showing the rates. 1905 to 1930, basically, there was sort of a standard rate up to 5 kilograms, which is 11 pounds. The rate was 10 oar, and then beyond 11 pounds, it was 1 additional oar for each 500 grams, which is a little bit over 1 pound, okay? In 1930, when they changed the rates, that's when they issued the higher value stamps. They increased the rates quite a bit. And they go into this, kind of prorated system where, up to 1 kilo was 110 oar, up to 3 kilos, 170, up to 5 kilos, 190, etc., all the way going up to 10 kilos. Beyond 10 kilos, again, we're talking about freight. That's a different type of, that's not a postal item, right? They also had, in 1930, a rate for newspapers, and the rate was 8 oar per kilogram. Kilogram is about 2 pounds, but there was a minimum rate of 1 krona. So that made, sending a newspaper quite expensive, right? This led to a bunch of complaints. People obviously didn't like these high rates. And then in 1931, they created another rate for printed matter that basically follow the same sort of weight limits, right? So 30, 60, 80, and 120. So much cheaper than the 1930 rate for newspapers, and cheaper than a regular parcel, right? All right. This is an example of one of those wrappers, and this is one that traveled from Greenland to Copenhagen, right? It is believed that, you know, there must have been some other stamp here that's been cut out, but who knows? And, you know, at least we can get the feel of what those parcels look like, right? So we see the stamps, we see a label with a control number, and we'll see more of this, where and who the parcel was going to. And there are two cancels here. And if you notice, the one on the bottom, it says Gotthab. That's basically the name of the settlement in Greenland where the parcel originated from. And then the one on the top is a cancel that we're going to see later on that says Board of Greenland. That's a Copenhagen cancel. So basically, it was canceled again once the parcel got delivered to the KGH office in Copenhagen. And this is pretty common for this type of mail, right? Here's another one that I saw at auction that, you know, it came with a certificate and everything. And I do, you know, the stamps are for certainly genuine. The cancels are genuine, but I do think that this is a philatelic item. I don't think that this is a genuine parcel. It doesn't have that, you know, label with a number. It doesn't have the double cancels. I think that this was just created for a collector. And the rate doesn't match the rate for a parcel, right? The maximum rate in this period would have been, you know, I think 20 or. So this has 32, which is kind of a very odd rate. But anyway, it does have a certificate and everything. It's not mine. It's not from my collection. This is what those parcel cards look like. And, you know, there's slightly different models, slightly different designs, but for the most part, they all are the same. On the bottom right, we see basically, you know, where the parcel was going to, the name of the person, the name of the settlement. The top right was space for the stamps. You can, you know, if you cram them tight, maybe 4 stamps at the tops. Most of the time, you don't see more than 3. The top left is where they would put this control label with a number. And I don't know this for certain, but this is kind of my assumption. I think that one label with the number went on the card, and then probably the same label with the same number went on the parcel, so that one could kind of tie the card with the parcel that it corresponded, right? This next grayed out part, this is where one could state the value of the parcel, and it was possible to purchase insurance. Insurance could not be paid in stamps, though. It had to be paid in cash. So we don't, you know, even we'll see one later on with the declared value, but the insurance was paid in cash. The next part states the number of parcels. So this one says 1 package. And then the bottom left, this is where you would put the weight, right? And typically we see it in metric system in kilograms, right? On the back of the card, you would write the name of the person sending the parcel, right? And in some cases, we also see additional stamps when there's not enough room in the front, then you can put additional stamps in the back as well. So this card, this is from 1927. It's got a 10-or stamp. So basically it's for a parcel up to 5 kilos. We see that it weighed 2.5 kilos. So that's basically the regular rate. They're not always 100% filled out. Sometimes they're missing information and stuff, but as long as most of it looks legit, I think for the most part, these are good items. So here's another one. This is from 1909 to 1912. We can, you know, there's no date stamps here, right? There's no dates anywhere, but we can more or less date these cards by the model of the card, by the model of the number label, and also by what type of stamp and what cancel, right? So we know more or less what period they were used, right? So this is another one for, you know, a 10-or rate. Here we see a package that was 6.5 kilos. So the 10-or stamp pays the initial 5, then the 2-or stamp pays for another kilo, and then the 1-or pays for that extra half, right? So that's 6.5. It says 1 package. And then, basically this was in place up until 1930. In 1930 is when they changed the rate. So we go into this system where depending on the maximum weight, we get the rate, right? So this is a half kilo package that has to pay 110 ore. That's what we see. And I'll show a little bit all the rates. And these are the most typical frankings that you're going to see, right? So this is a 170. So must have been a package up to 3 kilos. I don't know why it says 4. It's kind of odd. I don't have any doubts about the authenticity of this, but it's kind of a little bit of a mismatch, maybe a mistake. And you can see in here, it was insured for 40 and 95, 40 krona and 95. This would be the next rate, the 190 up to 5 kilos. And we see a little bit here of 5, right, in crayon. So that's the 190. And then the highest rate up to 10 kilos was the 340. And we see a 3 krona stamp and then the 40 ore in addition for a package of 8 kilograms, right? I mentioned the newspaper rate in 1930. This is one of the most difficult to find because it was only valid for 1 year, right? 1930 and into 1931. 1931, they changed the rates for print and matter. So this is, again, a newspaper rate. It was 8 ore per kilogram with a minimum rate of 1 krona. So that's the stamp that we see in here. And this was one package. It says in here, aviser, which in Danish means newspapers, and 3 kilograms, right? So the correct rate would be 84 ore, but they have to pay 1 krona, right? And I have one more of these. This one actually was 3 parcels of newspapers that were sent with a single card, right? So it was a 5 kilo, a 3 kilo, and a 4 kilo. If you add it all up, it's still under 1 krona, but at least it makes the rate a little bit more efficient, right? But again, it's one of those rare rates to find because, again, it was only valid for a short period of time. 1931, they brought in the printed matter rate. So we see, again, the 1, 3, 5, and 10 in terms of maximum weights. This is the lowest rate, so 30 ore for up to 1 kilogram, and we see the 1 in here. This is the 60 ore up to 3 kilograms. I have the 80 ore. This is a little bit harder to find. I don't see a lot of examples on this. I think I have maybe 3 or 4 recorded. So it's up to 5 kilos. That's what we see in here. And then the highest rate up to 10 kilos is the 120, which is this one, right? A package of 8 kilos. And again, we see one package, newspapers, aviser. And it feels like, okay, that's it. That's all we can do with cards. Well, actually, it gets more complicated because you could use the same card to send up to 3 parcels at a time, as long as they were going to the same person, obviously, right? So, and the parcels don't have to all be the same. So sometimes we see a regular parcel sent together with printed matter parcels with newspapers, right? So you have to figure out the rate for one of the parcels, the other parcel, the third parcel, add it all up. And then that's what composes this, the postage, really, right? So in this case, we have 3 packages. We see the 3 labels here, right? 748 to 750, 6 kilos, 8 kilos, and 6 kilos. This matches 3 packages of printed matter, most likely newspapers, maybe books, right? And they would all be 120. So 120 times 3, that's 360. So we see the 3 krona stamp and then 320s. One is in the back of the card. So that's the 360. This is what makes this a lot more interesting because you see like really weird postages, postage values, but you have to try to make up, how many parcels, what type of parcels, what was the weight, etc., right? And try to figure it out if it all adds up, right? What happened if you were not in Copenhagen? What happened if you were in another part of Denmark and you had to send a parcel to Greenland? Well, then you had to pay twice. You had to pay for the Danish Post to send your parcel from your town to the KGH office in Copenhagen. And then in Copenhagen, they would add the parcel post stamps, send them to Greenland, and then the person in Greenland getting the package would have to pay for that, right? So this is an example of that. This is a parcel card from, Danish Post, right? And it's for 2 packages. The total postage was 340. So we see 340 paid in Danish postage stamps. And that was for mailing the parcel from Nisted to the KGH office in Copenhagen. And then we see another 340 being added there to pay the transit to Greenland. So these are, add a little bit more complexity, add a little bit more variety to these collecting area, right? All right, not going to bother you more with cards. There's lots and lots of them. And if you're curious of seeing more, I have everything that comes up at auction. I try to save an image and document it, try to keep my own inventory. I think I have over 500 as of now. So there's quite a bit. But the stamps, as I mentioned before, they were not just used for parcels. They were not just used to pay postage, but they were also used fiscally in savings books. What are this? Basically, this was a savings system that was started by, the mail system, right? Where, they were trying to encourage the people living in Greenland to save some money because, when winter comes and it gets dark most of the day, there's not a lot of fishing, there's not a lot of hunting that we can do, but you're still hungry. So you need to have money to survive the winter. So they would give them these books with like spaces, and then people would go to the post offices, buy stamps and put them in the books. And then towards the end of the year, usually around Christmas time, they would turn in the books and basically get all the cash that they had saved during the year, right? Most of this has been destroyed. They were, after they were basically cashed in, they would be collected at the capital in Greenland and they would be burned. But, as it always happens, some of them survived. All the ones that we know are from 1927, 28, 35, 36, or 38. So all the others from all the other years, as far as I know, they're lost, right? They've been burned. Most of them are canceled. All the stamps were canceled. They're canceled with a special cancel that says Avane, which means north, and then a number. And the number corresponded to the settlement. There were a total of 38 settlements that were spread across 7 different districts, and I'll tell a little bit more of that. So we see these Abana cancels, or sometimes we see the name of the colony, hand stamp with the name of the colony where the booklets were issued. Right? This is what they look like. This is kind of the front cover and the back cover, and this is what they looked at on the inside. Right? It's basically just space where you would put the stamps. And the 20-or stamp, as I mentioned before, this is the one that was used most commonly in this booklets, right? In this saving system. So we see a lot of red. Sometimes when it's not the 20, we see the 1 krona, if people were lucky enough to save that much money. So this is another example. This is a book from 1938, and we see some 1 krona stamps in here. They're not as common, right? But they're you see them every once in a while. And this one, we can see the cancel, which is this hand stamp with the name of the colony. Right? And that's the same booklet. So these are the examples of those Avana cancels that I mentioned. So not all the numbers exist. There 1 to 38. I think there's a couple, maybe 2 or 3 of them are not known. They probably existed, but the books must have been lost. But you can get most of the numbers. They're not super difficult to find. Like I said, 38 different parishes is what they call them, I guess, settlements, distributed in 7 districts. And I put here the location of the capital of each district. So basically it gives you an idea that, most of these were concentrated in this like central western coast of Greenland, right? That's where this system, saving system, was used. So obviously, I'm into collecting everything. So I try to find all of these. I'm missing still a few numbers that are hard to find, but it's another area that one can expand into. Let's talk about cancels. For the most part, all the cancels used were rubber stamps. Purpling, blacking is what we commonly find. But they're not like postal cancels with a date stamp for the most part, right? This one shown here is it says Board of Greenland was one of the most common that we find. They're either linear cancels or sometimes we see them in this oval. In July of 1936 is the first time when they adopted a steel date stamp. So it was looking very, very similar to the regular postage cancels, right? postal cancels. And it also had the same basically name, I guess, Board of Greenland, right? A lot of the stamps that we see, and we see a lot of cancels that are not, genuinely from the period where the stamps were being used. So basically what we call CTOs. The KGH was okay canceling anything that a collector would bring to their windows up until 1956 with anything that they had. And the same happened in Greenland for many, many years. So we see a lot of CTOs. They're genuine cancels, they're genuine stamps, but they're not real postage uses. And as long as we know that, I think that that's okay. And most authors, really try to collect the cancels, fully knowing that, there are stamps that were never used for mailing a parcel, right? Date stamps from Greenland, they were not put in use until after the parcel post stamps were made obsolete. So if you see a steel cancel from Greenland, it's definitely not a genuine one. And the ones that are genuine most likely come from soaking off stamps from saving books, right? Because those are the most common uses in Greenland. They were not used in Denmark, obviously, right? All right, I'll just show some examples of Danish or Copenhagen and Greenland cancels, right? Copenhagen, between 1905 and 1908, we have this very simple cancel. It's basically the coat of arms of Greenland with the bear in the middle. Very nice looking cancel. I love this cancel. Then they start adding words. So 1908 to 1912, we see these linear cancels, administration for the colony of Greenland. They changed the name in 1912, so they changed the cancel. This is the board for the colony of Greenland. Again, the board for the colony of Greenland and the board for the colony of Greenland, but 3 different cancels. So this is like a 3-line. This is a 1-line, and then this is inside the oval. And then beyond 1925, they changed the name again. Now it's very simple, the Board of Greenland. And again, there's like multiple linear cancels and a couple of ovals as well. Right? This is very, very common. This is the most common to find, right? 1936, like I said, that's when they brought the Board of Greenland steel cancel. So that's when we actually have dates for the stamps, right? So as long as they're, between 1936 and 1938, these are most likely genuine uses, right? And if we talk about Greenland cancels, we see kind of the same thing, right? Rubber stamps in different colors. And, I'll show some examples here, and I'm showing the map with where the location of the settlement is. But, like these 2 on the bottom, I believe these are stamps that were soaked off from a savings book. The 2 on the top, they're most likely CTOs. These are probably mostly legit from savings books and a few others. I think that these are all genuine cancels from savings books. I have a few, maybe 3 or 4 that I believe are genuine postal uses from Greenland to Denmark. And the reason I say that is because they have the 2 cancels, one from Greenland and then another one upon arrival in Copenhagen, right? So they have the cancel of the colony and then the cancel of the KGH office. So that's a good telltale for a genuine cancel. And this is as far as I collect, but if anybody's interested in getting into this field, into this area, right, there's some other things that you should be aware of, right? There's been other things happening with this design, right? So the first thing were the modern reprints. Obviously, these stamps were very popular. In the 1980s, between 83 and 85, the Ministry of Greenland decided to basically issue this souvenir sheets as, just a way to raise money because they knew that collectors love the stamps, right? So this had no postal value. They were not, stamps that one could use for anything. They're just, a pretty souvenir, right? But there's like a lot of different ones, right? And, I'll show some of them. This one shows, I guess, the 3 original stamps in colors that they were never issued in. So the 5 in brown, yes, but the 1 and the 10 in brown, they never existed. I don't know why they did this. This is basically showing like the first printing, the second printing. So notice the two different colors of the paper, right? And then the second printing with the straight edges, one straight edge, two straight edges, and then this is the reperforated with compound. So they try to show the story of how the different printings, came to be, and etc. Right? These are the 1930 new higher values, the 71 and 3. These are the Schultz issues, so the 1937 with perf 10 and 75. So the last 4 stamps that were issued, and they even made like entire sheets of 25, right? But again, these are just souvenirs. They're not really rare or especially valuable, right? They're very easy to find for very little money if one is interested. I've also seen this proofs and being advertised and sold as proofs. These are really proofs, but these proofs were made with the original types of the early 1900s, but they were done as a way to test the colors towards making these souvenir sheets in the 1980s. So these are not proofs of the early 1900s, they're modern proofs, right? They're not especially rare, they're not especially valuable, but they are proofs to make a souvenir sheet printed with the original types, with the original stamps. So just as long as we understand what it is, I think that's okay if you want to have, right? I've also seen these two. These were printed in gray, which is weird. And the values are also strange, a 3 or and a 5 krona. These are, as much as I can tell, these are fantasies. These never existed. They were never issued. These are just made up stamps, right? But again, I've seen them offered for sale at some point. So I know that they're out there, right? And if one wants actual stamps, then Greenland actually put the parcel post stamps in an actual stamp in I think these are from the late 1990s or early 2000s. But basically they did the 5, the 10, and the 20 as a kind of stamp on stamp design. And these exist in sheets of the 3 values. And they also had a souvenir sheet, which is this one over here, right? So if you want to have a version of the parcel post stamps that very accessible to everyone, right? This could be another option, right? And a lot of the information, I couldn't have done all of this research by myself, right? So all of these is published. If anybody is interested in learning like all the different printings, all the different plate flaws, and etc., everything is on this book by Eric Warren. He was born in New Jersey from Danish parents, moved back to Denmark, I think when he was like 6 years old or something, and lived most of his life in Denmark. And he's the one that did the probably the most comprehensive study on parcel post stamps and postal history. So this book is at the APS library, very easy to get for almost nothing. And really, really good source of information if you're interested in kind of getting into the details of this area. And I want to wrap it up here. Thank you, everybody. Hopefully this was entertaining and informative. And yeah, if there's any questions, I'm happy to have a discussion.
Very good.
But a round of applause. Just simply amazing. Absolutely amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question with when you showed the Scott values from the catalog,
yeah,
with such low numbers, I was surprised that the stamps were not that expensive. I guess is there not as much of an interest in it, or yeah?
So they're not that expensive, to be honest, and these are catalog values, so you can get them. Most of them you can get for a fraction of these numbers, right?
Yeah.
The ones that are really expensive are the 1905s and some of the 1910s. So the ones that are perforated 12, because those were the ones that collectors didn't get their hands into, right? So the only ones that we know unused or mint are the very few remnants that they had unsold when they started selling to collectors in 1915. So if you notice the perf 12, right, it's catalog this is mint hinge, right? It's $500. You can get these stamps for, $250 on a good day. If you're not that patient, maybe close to $300. And similar for the 5-or perf 12 and the 10-or perf 12. The others are really not that difficult to find, and they're not that expensive, right?
Like you said, some made this in the hundreds and few thousands. Any other stamp would be a lot more expensive. So, yeah, that explains it. Were as you were going through, it looks like some of the stamps were canceled in Greenland, some canceled in Denmark, but most were mailed from Denmark.
That's right. So
Okay.
everything that has a Copenhagen cancel is something that traveled from Denmark to Greenland, which is the vast majority of this mail. If we see something that traveled the other direction, most likely, if I'm going to spend money on it, I'd rather that it has the two cancels, the origin cancel from Greenland and the arrival cancel into Copenhagen.
Okay, thank you.
That's what gives me peace of mind. And I didn't put pictures of those in here. I have maybe 2 or 3 of them. They're very rare.
Quick question. I mean, so these, I know, especially for the newspapers, were used on that cover card, which was placed on top of whatever was being sent. Have you seen an original use with the existing newspaper that was sent from A to B? I mean, those rarely come up here in our era, the area I studied, 1850s anyway, when it was 1 cent for a circular, and sometimes you'd see that wrapper intact.
Right.
Any of those? I mean, that's really got to be like hen's teeth. True, maybe? I'm asking.
So I'm not 100% sure about this, but I don't think that the cards travel with the parcel, right? Okay. My hypothesis, I'm going to say hypothesis because I don't have any.
Sure.
Right? But I think that the parcels were basically given a label with a number, and probably the ship's captain had all the cards, right, with the postage and, knowing exactly where each parcel was going to with the numbers. And basically the number on the card was matched to the number on the parcel. But I don't know. I've never seen the cards together with anything else, right? The cards are always it's just the card.
Just the cards. Yeah. So there's still some unknowns, and there's still some more research to do on determining that's great. Thank you.
Other questions, folks?
Well, I've got a question. You gave an example of a parcel that originated outside of Copenhagen, and it had Danish postage to Copenhagen, and then the postage onto Greenland. Are there examples from the other direction where a parcel originated in Greenland to Copenhagen and then beyond Metro Copenhagen, and what would that look like?
Yeah, I've not seen one of those. I've only been collecting this topic for 6 years, and this 6 years I've maybe seen not just the soaked stamps, but kind of a wrapper, right, with a fragment of what was a wrapper of the parcel. Maybe I've seen 3 or 4, right? So again, they're very, very, very rare. And I mean, if you want one, I would love to have one in my collection, but I need to be ready to spend a 4-figure number on it. So
Thank you.
Every once in a while, we do get crazy and spend 3 or 4 figures. Well, 4 figures. Yeah. It's got to be a special piece. That's for sure.
It's got to be a special piece.
Yeah.
I did. I had an exhibit at Ballpex in Baltimore in 2024. Yes. So I had a 3-frame exhibit with this collection, and I've been trying to expand it and grow it, etc. One piece of feedback that the judges gave me is, you got to find a wrapper, that travel in the other direction. And I'm like, why would I exhibit again unless I have that, right?
Right.
So
Have you written any articles on this? Because
No,
I
no.
write quite a bit and I publish a lot and I do a lot, almost no exhibiting. So I mean, I think this is a great topic to get in
Yeah.
print.
No, it's a fascinating story. I
Yes.
totally agree. And as I learn about it, that's
Yeah.
what got me more and more into it, right? Because it's fascinating.
Yes.
I'm not sharing anything that's not, known widely or published before many times by different authors, right? I'll say that my only humble contribution to this field is that, if you go through the specialized catalogs, like even the Scandinavia specialized, the facet catalog, they will talk about the different printings and they will say, this is on thick paper, this is on medium thick paper, this is on thin, this is on extra thin, right? And it's like,
Right.
how do I tell them apart, right? One says almost transparent, like what the heck? So my humble contribution is that I bought one of these modern electronic calipers. I was able to
Yes.
actually measure
Yes.
the paper,
Measure.
and I
Right.
can, every printing, I can tell you exactly the thickness of the paper.
So that's real important information, right, to determine that,
Yeah,
right? Whether it's India and soft porous. I mean, you can go through all of that, those different
yeah.
types. So that's
And
a
and
great
it's a
contribution.
$40 tool that you can get
Yeah.
on Amazon, right? And it
Yeah.
gives you peace of mind. I have the right stamp on the right place.
Yes, right. So that should be an appendix. So that should be added to the catalog so folks know what the heck they're looking at. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great contribution. Great contribution. Thank you. And I didn't waste any time, by the way, because this presentation is online, by the way. I'm just saying to this group, because again, like I said, I got a sneak peek earlier and just was fascinated by it because so many intricacies. Talk about covering a topic from end to end. You really covered the topic from end to
That
end.
was the
So
aim. That was the goal.
yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah.
Do many of you in our audience tonight have one of these stamps?
Nope.
You
I
got one,
have
Joe?
probably one or two, and maybe I have more buried. I didn't even know, but maybe
Yeah,
somebody else has.
I have one. That's it.
Yeah. I might have the rare one, Doc. I'm gonna go look. You never know. Gonna go compare.
Yeah,
That's what I do whenever we have
everybody
a
check the
presentation. Do I
perforations
have the
now.
rare one? And
Yeah.
Yes. Check the
rarely.
perforations. I
The
do
only
Check
like
the
time I found a
perforations.
good one was with something donated, and it went to the club with that Ben Pickett,
Yes.
error.
Yes. That's right. Yeah, I'm fascinated by again the just the reuse, right? And pulling these and reusing them and just the lack of consistency. We're gonna grab whatever perf gauge we have and we're just gonna do it and we're gonna push them out. I mean, there's the
And who's
variations
gonna
of
care, right? And yeah,
this is utilitarian, right? They're just
yeah,
doing it to get them out there because they're going to be used for XYZ. They're not concerned
exactly.
about collectors like us. You're going to drive us crazy. 52 different types of perforations. Come on. So, yeah, but that's what keeps us going. So,
Exactly.
appreciate it.
Jaume, something I mentioned in one of our emails in the past, growing up in a quasi-Danish family, I always heard the term Danish modern. And you mentioned that about the modern design back to 1905. And I think of some of the early 20th century, late 19th century Danish definitives. Very modern designs.
Yeah,
And when I was in seventh grade, they got me a Danish modern desk. I was happy as could be. But yeah, I mean, they look way ahead of their time.
exactly.
Hey, is that it, folks? Other questions? Well, again, I want to thank you very much. Very thorough, very interesting, informative. And I'm going to go check mine out later tonight. And again, I thank you. And please,
Yeah,
if you have anything to share when we go into our show and tell tonight, please join us. So, yep.
sounds good. Yeah, thanks everybody for your time today and